In March 2025, a silent silver sphere fell from the sky over rural Colombia, and nothing about it made sense. Witnesses watched it move in sharp, unnatural patterns before slicing through power lines without damage. When scientists scanned the object, they found no seams, no welds, and no signs of impact. Inside were layered metals, microscopic structures, and materials no ancient civilization should have known how to create. Radiocarbon tests dated organic material inside the object to over 12,500 years ago. If that result is correct, then this machine was built long before recorded history, and it wasn't meant to be forgotten. On the afternoon of March 2nd, 2025, residents in the rural outskirts of Buga, Colombia, noticed something moving in the sky that didn't behave like an aircraft. It wasn't falling, gliding, or hovering. Witnesses described sharp directional changes, abrupt stops, and zigzag movements that defied inertia. Several people pulled out their phones, capturing footage of a smooth silver object descending in controlled bursts, as if responding to forces unseen. Moments later, the object crossed directly through a set of high-voltage power lines. The lines failed instantly, sparking and collapsing to the ground. The object did not slow down. It did not deform. It did not leave scorch marks. It continued its descent and came to rest in an open field without an explosion, impact crater, or debris trail. When locals approached the landing site, they expected wreckage. Instead, they found a metallic sphere roughly the size of a large medicine ball, resting silently on the ground. The surface was perfectly smooth, with no seams, rivets, or openings of any kind. Several witnesses reported that the object felt unnaturally cold, despite having just passed through energized electrical infrastructure. One detail stood out immediately. When water was poured over the sphere, it didn't pool or run off. It flashed into vapor on contact, as if the surface rejected liquid entirely. Yet thermal imaging showed no external heat source that could explain the reaction. The object was transported indoors for basic measurements. Initial weighing registered just over 2 kilograms. Hours later, using the same scale, in the same room, under the same conditions, the reading changed dramatically, nearly 10 kilograms. No material had been added, no external force applied. The mass appeared to fluctuate without explanation. At this point, researchers faced a difficult conclusion. Either the measurements were wrong, or the object did not obey conventional physical assumptions. And this was before anyone had even looked inside. Once the sphere was secured, researchers moved quickly to answer the most basic question: what was it made of? There were no openings, no access points, and no way to safely cut into the object without risking irreversible damage. The only option was imaging. High-resolution X-ray and CT scans were ordered, expected to reveal either a hollow interior or a dense, solid mass. What appeared on the screens stopped the room cold. The sphere was neither hollow nor solid. Instead, it contained a layered internal structure. Unlike anything previously documented, 3 distinct concentric shells sat perfectly nested inside one another, each composed of a different material with a different density. There were no seams connecting them, no weld lines, no mechanical joints. Each layer appeared to exist as part of a single, unified form. Then the scans went deeper. Suspended within the innermost layer were 18 smaller spherical objects, evenly spaced and arranged with mathematical precision. They weren't randomly distributed. They followed a strict geometric pattern, mirrored across multiple axes. Engineers immediately recognized that the layout wasn't aesthetic, it was functional. Connecting these internal spheres were dozens of filament-like channels radiating inward. Under magnification, these strands appeared translucent, yet coated with a thin metallic layer. They behaved optically, guiding light through their length with minimal loss, more efficiently than many modern fiber optic cables. Even more unsettling was what wasn't present. There were no tool marks, no signs of drilling, machining, or assembly. Every component appeared to have formed together, as if the object had been grown rather than built, manufacturing experts struggled to describe a process that could create such complexity without leaving microscopic evidence of fabrication. As technicians adjusted the scan parameters, subtle anomalies began to appear. Certain internal components responded differently depending on the wavelength used, as if the structure itself interacted with the scanning energy. This wasn't passive matter, it was reactive. By the end of the first imaging session, the research team reached a consensus that would define everything that followed. Whatever this object was, it was not a simple artifact, not debris, and not a natural formation. It was a machine, and it had been engineered with intent. After imaging confirmed the object was engineered, the next step was determining when it was made. With no access point and no way to extract material from the metal layers without damaging the structure, researchers focused on microscopic organic traces discovered inside the filament channels. Within several of the internal pathways, lab technicians identified residues of natural resin embedded deep within the structure and sealed away from external contamination. Radiocarbon testing was ordered, with expectations kept conservative. Most assumed the resin would date to recent decades, possibly introduced during atmospheric exposure or transport. The results shattered that assumption. The organic material dated to approximately 12,560 years before present. Independent laboratories repeated the test. The margin of error narrowed. The date remained unchanged. This placed the resin in the final phase of the last ice age, thousands of years before agriculture, before permanent settlements, and long before any known civilization possessed even basic metalworking knowledge. At that time, humans used stone tools. There were no furnaces capable of refining aluminum, no understanding of composite alloys, and no concept of optical transmission. Yet, the resin wasn't random. Under microscopic examination, it was found anchoring the translucent filaments inside the sphere, acting as a stabilizing medium. The placement was deliberate, precise, and consistent across multiple internal channels. This wasn't contamination, it was engineering. To rule out environmental interference, isotope analysis was performed. The resin showed no signs of modern carbon intrusion. It had been sealed inside the structure since its formation. The implication was unavoidable. Whatever built the sphere had incorporated organic material during its construction more than 12 millennia ago. This forced researchers into a narrow set of explanations, none of them comfortable. Either the dating methods were fundamentally flawed, multiple labs had made identical errors, or the object itself predated known technological history by an impossible margin. As the findings circulated quietly among material scientists and archaeologists, reactions ranged from disbelief to outright denial. Several experts declined to comment publicly, citing the need for further verification. Others admitted privately that if the dating held, it would require rewriting large sections of human history. The object was no longer just technologically anomalous, it was temporally impossible, and that raised a far more unsettling question. If something this advanced existed 12,560 years ago, what else may have been lost to time, buried, submerged, or erased long before modern humans ever began keeping records? With the dating results raising alarms, researchers turned their focus to the sphere's composition. If the object truly originated more than 12,000 years ago, then its materials should reflect the technological limits of that era. Instead, the analysis produced results that made even seasoned metallurgists uneasy. Spectroscopic testing showed the outer shell was composed of a high-purity metallic alloy, unlike anything catalogued in archaeological records. The material was lightweight, yet exhibited tensile strength exceeding modern aerospace-grade titanium. Under stress, it flexed slightly instead of cracking, distributing force across its surface in a way normally seen only in advanced composite structures. The middle layer behaved even more strangely. When researchers introduced controlled microdamage, tiny fractures appeared under magnification. Within 48 hours, those fractures began to close. No heat, no chemical treatment. The material restructured itself at the molecular level. Self-repairing metal is a concept still confined largely to experimental labs. No known naturally occurring alloy behaves this way. Chemical analysis deepened the mystery. Trace elements included refined aluminum combined with rare earth components such such as cerium and neodymium. These elements were not isolated or industrially usable until the 19th century. Aluminum itself was considered more valuable than gold before modern electrolysis techniques existed. Yet here it was, alloyed with precision inside an object allegedly created during the Ice Age. Equally unsettling was what the tests failed to find. There were no impurities typical of primitive smelting, no slag residue, no uneven grain structures. The atomic lattice appeared unusually uniform, as if the material had been formed under conditions of extreme control. Thermal testing only added to the confusion. Exposed to temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius, the sphere's surface showed no measurable heat absorption. Sensors confirmed the external temperature rose, but the internal structure remained unchanged, as though insulated by something beyond conventional physics. At this stage, researchers were forced to confront a hard truth. The sphere was not assembled from parts. It was not cast, machined, or welded. It appeared to have been formed as a single unified structure, aligned down to the molecular level. Whatever created it possessed a level of material science humanity is only now beginning to approach. And according to every test conducted so far, that knowledge existed long before history says it should have. By the time material analysis concluded, one fact was unavoidable. The sphere was not designed to be inert. It wasn't a ceremonial artifact, a container, or debris from a failed experiment. Its internal architecture suggested function, coordination, and intent. The focus shifted from what it was made of to what it was designed to do. Researchers began mapping the relationships between the 18 internal microspheres. Their placement wasn't random or purely symmetrical. Each one occupied a precise position relative to the others, forming a closed network connected through the translucent filament channels. When low-level energy was introduced into the system, signals did not simply pass through. They branched, looped, and recombined. Engineers recognized the behavior immediately. This wasn't linear circuitry, it resembled distributed processing. As testing continued, the responses grew more complex. Identical inputs produced different outputs depending on timing, intensity, and sequence. In other words, the system wasn't just transmitting information, it was interpreting it. Some pathways became more active over time, while others quieted, as though the structure was optimizing itself. The layout closely mirrored models used in neural networks and adaptive computing systems. Yet this wasn't software. There was no code to modify, no firmware to update. The processing behavior was embedded physically into the structure itself. That realization reframed the entire investigation. The sphere wasn't storing information the way a hard drive would. It was processing continuously, reacting to its environment in subtle ways. Background electromagnetic noise, temperature fluctuations, and even seismic vibrations produced measurable internal changes. What disturbed researchers most was the implication of endurance. This system showed no signs of degradation, no corrosion, no decay. If it had been active for over 12,000 years, it hadn't slowed down, it hadn't worn out, it hadn't failed. This raised a question no one was eager to answer. Why build a machine meant to operate for geological timescale? Whatever created the sphere did not expect it to be found quickly. It was designed to wait, to observe, and to persist far beyond the lifespan of any single civilization. At this point, the sphere stopped being treated as a relic from the past. It was now understood as something far more unsettling, a system still functioning in the present, built by unknown hands, for reasons that remained completely unclear. As researchers struggled to explain how such advanced technology could exist so far outside known history, attention turned to the moment in time when the sphere was created. The date, approximately 12,560 years ago, placed its construction squarely within one of the most violent periods Earth has ever experienced, the Younger Dryas. This was not a slow climatic shift. Geological evidence shows a sudden, catastrophic reversal in global temperatures. Ice sheets advanced rapidly, sea levels fluctuated, entire ecosystems collapsed in a matter of centuries, possibly decades. Ice core samples reveal abrupt changes in atmospheric composition. Sediment layers contain microspherules and rare elemental spikes, consistent with high-energy cosmic events. Human history during this period becomes fragmented. Archaeological cultures disappear from the record almost overnight. Long-established settlements are abandoned. tool traditions vanish. Whatever existed before the Younger Dryas did not survive it intact. If the sphere truly originated during this time, its creation coincided with planetary chaos. That timing raised unsettling possibilities. This was not technology built during stability. It was technology built during collapse. Some researchers proposed that the sphere may have been designed as a response to the catastrophe itself, a long-term monitoring system, a data recorder meant to survive environmental devastation, or even a preservation device built to outlast ice, floods, and mass extinction. Sea levels during the Younger Dryas were more than 100 meters lower than today. Vast coastal regions now submerged beneath oceans would have been exposed land. If advanced cultures existed, those areas would have been prime locations. Today, they are inaccessible, unexplored, and largely unmapped. This context reframed the sphere's endurance. Its self-repairing materials, resistance to heat, and seamless construction were no longer abstract anomalies. They made sense for an object designed to survive a world undergoing extreme trauma. The sphere didn't appear hurried or crude. It appeared deliberate, purpose-built for longevity. Whatever intelligence created it understood the scale of the disaster unfolding around them, and that led to the most troubling implication yet. If the sphere was built in anticipation of planetary collapse, then its creators were not reacting blindly. They were planning, which means they may have known what was coming long before the ice returned, and long before history went silent. With the sphere's internal structure defying explanation, researchers finally turned their attention to its exterior. At first glance, the surface appeared smooth and unbroken, but under high magnification, something else emerged. The entire sphere was covered in microscopic engravings, patterns so precise they were invisible to the naked eye. These were not scratches. They were not decorative etchings. Each line was carved with a level of control that modern laser systems struggle to maintain on curved metal surfaces. Some grooves measured thinner than a human hair, yet remained perfectly consistent in depth and spacing across the entire object. Linguists and archaeologists were brought in to analyze the markings. What they found was unsettling. Certain shapes loosely resembled ancient scripts, early runic forms, Proto-Sanskrit curves, even symbols similar to Sumerian cuneiform, but none of the matches were exact. Every comparison broke down under closer inspection. The symbols appeared familiar without belonging to any known language. Mathematicians noticed something even stranger. When the patterns were mapped spatially, they aligned with mathematical constants. Ratios matching the golden mean appeared repeatedly. Spiral arrangements mirrored harmonic structures found in atomic physics and biological systems. These weren't written messages. They were mathematical expressions. Then came the reaction tests. When the sphere was exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies, certain engravings responded. Lines dimmed, then glowed faintly, shifting in sequence as if following an internal logic. Under controlled stimulation, multiple symbols activated simultaneously for the first time. This changed everything. The engravings weren't static markings meant to be read. They were functional components, interfaces. Further experiments showed subtle changes when exposed to sound frequencies, light wavelengths, and electromagnetic fields. The sphere wasn't just passively engraved, it was responsive. This raised a disturbing question. If these markings were designed to interact with energy, then they weren't symbolic language at all. They were part of the machine itself, a system meant to be triggered. And if the engravings were interfaces, then someone, or something, had designed them expecting that one day another intelligence would be capable of activating them. The sphere wasn't just built to endure time, it was built to be understood, eventually. For months, the sphere appeared stable. Internal readings showed low-level activity, but nothing dramatic enough to suggest urgency. Researchers assumed the system was either dormant or operating at a baseline state after thousands of years of isolation. That assumption collapsed during a late-night monitoring session. Without warning, the internal signals began to synchronize. What had once been irregular pulses suddenly locked into precise, repeating intervals. Engineers compared the effect to metronomes, snapping into perfect rhythm. This wasn't fluctuation, it was coordination. Seconds Seconds later, the sphere released an electromagnetic surge, far stronger than anything previously recorded. Multiple magnetic sensors failed instantly. Data streams clipped at their maximum thresholds. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees in moments, triggering emergency alerts. Inside the sphere, the translucent filaments illuminated one by one in a cascading sequence, racing through the internal network like firing neurons. For the first time, the entire system appeared fully active. Then came the anomaly no one could explain. Seismic sensors positioned hundreds of meters away registered a faint harmonic signal at the exact moment of the pulse. The waveform wasn't identical to the sphere's emission, but it was structurally related. When analysts overlaid the data, the proportional alignment was impossible to ignore. The signal hadn't originated from the lab. Natural processes don't produce clean geometric timing across independent systems. Researchers worked through every possible explanation: instrument error, solar interference, atmospheric noise. None fit. The only remaining conclusion was the most unsettling one. Either the sphere had detected something external or something else had responded to it. Deeper analysis revealed layered micro-oscillations hidden within the main pulse, structured patterns riding beneath the signal like a secondary language. This wasn't a discharge or malfunction. It was transmission. When older data was re-examined, a trend emerged. The sphere's internal activity had been increasing steadily for weeks, even months, as if it had been approaching a threshold. The activation wasn't spontaneous. It was triggered. That realization reframed everything. If the sphere was built during the Younger Dryas, a time of sudden climate collapse and planetary trauma, then its reactivation during a period of magnetic instability, seismic unrest, and accelerating environmental change could not be coincidence. The conditions it appeared to be responding to were eerily similar to those present when it was first created. This raised a final, deeply troubling possibility. The sphere was never meant to be discovered. It was meant to operate silently, monitoring the planet until specific conditions were met. And if those conditions are returning, then the sphere may not be remembering the past. It may be preparing for the future.